Hey guys, Work here. Just gonna go over really quick these two lower parts kits I've got here. They're both from Anderson Manufacturing, and this is one of the original ones that I purchased. This is the replacement that I got from Anderson when I contacted them about this one. So let me show you really quick why I contacted them. It's just a standard lower kit. But here's where the problem comes, is the trigger group. I purchased two of these. They have both had this issue. The other one was actually a little worse, but I've actually already reworked it and made it a reasonable trigger. Here's the problem. So if we pull the trigger out here, these three parts here are the problem. So you've got the disconnector, the trigger itself, and the hammer. If you take a look at these, let's start with the trigger. It's an uncoated trigger, which I don't have a problem with. What I do have a problem with is this right here. So that is a casting nub right on the sear face of the trigger. So that was the first problem. This sear face isn't very flat and nice to begin with. This edge is really poor. So the first thing I ended up doing with the other one, and what I will end up doing with this one, is cleaning up, polishing this surface, and then polishing this top to get a nice crisp edge here. The second problem is the hammer. So the sear surface on the hammer is not the best, but it could be worse. The problem with the hammer is this little scallop area here. Camera's not focusing, but if you can see that just a little bit. Now what that ends up doing, as the disconnector comes in and grabs that, it actually gives it a little hump. You can see it kind of jump once I get past that. Well, it doesn't always make that jump. So what it'll do is it'll actually get caught up there. When you release the trigger, the disconnect doesn't release, and you end up stuck with the hammer still down, caught on the disconnector. The second thing I ended up having to do was clean up that scallop. I had to take a file in, file it out, and then take some really clean grit sandpaper and get that out of there. So that was the second thing I ended up having to do, was clean up the hammer. Then the third thing I had to do was clean up the disconnector itself. Down here, the dimensions in here and the pocket in the trigger were actually incorrect, and the disconnector couldn't travel far enough back in the trigger for the hammer to be able to come down and interact with the disconnector without physically moving the trigger. Typically, it should be able to have enough give so that with the trigger fully pulled back, the hammer can come back, interface with the disconnector, and then when you release the trigger, the disconnector releases and the hammer gets caught on the sear. On the other one, I had to completely reshape the disconnector. I had to take off about 1/8 of an inch to the back and 1/16 of an inch at the front here to give this more clearance to be able to tip inside the trigger, to be able to interface with the hammer. So I had all those problems with it. Everything else seems relatively well done. It's just this trigger group is absolutely horrible. I got a hold of Anderson. Someone from Anderson contacted me relatively quickly. They asked what was going on, what they could do to make it better, and they ended up sending me two replacement parts kits. So this is the replacement kit. It is a different trigger group, which I am fine with, obviously. So it's a different trigger altogether. This one, the trigger itself is a much better edge. There's no casting marks here, but it is still a relatively rough finish, so I'm still going to smooth that out. I'm going to clean it up, polish it. The hammer here does not have that scalloped portion on the back. It's just a straight disconnector, so that's going to be a much nicer interface there. The disconnector itself seems to be the same shape as the other one. I'm thinking maybe the pocket in the hammer dimensions have been altered to allow it to tip back and interface with the hammer. This is not a bash on Anderson, as I said. These are both Anderson. Contacted them, and within I contacted them last Friday, and on Wednesday of this week is when I got my new kits. Within 3 business days, they had turned around, gotten me parts, and made everything right. So props to Anderson. for their quick response, for holding up, standing up for their product, and for, you know, supporting the customer, because really in the end, that's what it's about. And they seem to know that. They took care of me, and I will gladly do business with them again. That's what I've got on Anderson. Their customer service, taking care of me, and with my lower parts kit problem. So until next time, talk to you later.